My name is Garnet Rivers. I am 65 years old and I live in the small town of Stillwater, Oklahoma. I worked as a mechanic at a local agricultural machinery factory for 37 years until I was forced into retirement 3 years ago. The factory made plows, cultivators, and other equipment for farmers across the state. The work was hard but honest. I showed up at 7 every morning, worked until 4, earned a decent wage, and never cheated anyone. My wife Dolores died 8 years ago, and since then I have been living alone in our small house. We met in high school and got married when I was 21 and she was 19. We lived together for 42 years and I never regretted my choice. Dolores worked at the local library, loved to read, and always kept the house tidy. After she died, the house seemed too big and empty, but I got used to it over time. Dolores and I had two daughters, Charlene, who is now 38 and lives here in town with her husband Braxton and their two children, and Ruby, who is 34 and works as a nurse in Tulsa. Ruby graduated from medical school and married a nice guy named David, who works as an engineer for an oil company. They don't have children yet, but they're in no hurry. They say they want to save up for their own house first. Ruby comes to visit me once a month, usually on Sundays, bringing homemade food and telling me about her work at the hospital. But I see Charlene and her grandchildren almost every week. She has two children, Tyler, who is 12, and Casey, who is 9. Charlene only finished high school and never really tried to find a job. Right after graduation, she married Braxton Templeton, who was a few years older than her. Braxton works as a loader at a building materials warehouse. His salary isn't great, but he manages to feed his family. They live in a rented apartment on the other side of town. My house is small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a small basement where I keep my preserves and tools. Dolores always loved order, and I try to keep the house in the same condition she left it. In the living room, there is an old leather sofa that we bought back in the 70s, an oak coffee table that I made myself, and a large TV that I bought after my wife's death. On the walls hang family photos, our wedding, our daughter's birthdays, graduations, the birth of our grandchildren. Behind the house is a 1/4-acre plot of land where I grow vegetables for myself and my neighbors. Every spring I plant tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, carrots, onions, and greens. Dolores taught me how to preserve vegetables for the winter, and now I have rows of jars of pickles and marinades in my basement. My neighbors often ask me to share my harvest, especially tomatoes. Mine turn out to be particularly large and sweet. I have a decent pension, about $1,400 a month, plus a small amount of savings that I accumulated over the years. The factory had a good pension plan, and I always set aside a percentage of my salary. Dolores always said I was too frugal, but now I'm grateful to her for teaching me how to budget and not spend money on nonsense. I have more than enough to live on. I can afford good food, pay all my bills without any problems, and sometimes buy something for the house or for my grandchildren. On that May morning, it was Wednesday, May 7th, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. out of habit. Although I can sleep longer now that I'm retired, after so many years of work, my body is used to getting up early. I had oatmeal with honey for breakfast, drank coffee, and went out to the garden around 8 a.m. The weather was excellent. The sun was shining brightly but not hotly. The temperature was 22 degrees Celsius, and there was a light breeze. It was perfect weather for working in the garden. I was digging in the garden, planting tomato seedlings that I had grown myself on the windowsill back in March. These were the Beefmaster and cherry varieties, which grow particularly well in our climate. I started preparing the seedlings at the end of February, sowing the seeds in special pots, watering them every day, and making sure they got enough light. By May, I had 24 strong seedlings that were ready to be transplanted into the open ground. I prepared the soil for the garden bed back in April. I dug it up and added compost, which I make myself from food waste and fallen leaves. Each tomato bush had to be carefully removed from the pot without damaging the roots. A hole of the appropriate size had to be dug. The plant had to be planted and immediately tied to a wooden stake. It's painstaking work, but I love it. There's something soothing about working with the earth. I was just tying the 6th young shoot to the stake when I heard a loud cry from the neighboring plot. I straightened up, stretched my back, and saw Norma running out of the Belcher house, a 72-year-old woman with whom we have been friends for many years. Norma was widowed 10 years ago and lives alone with her son Denver, who causes her nothing but trouble. Help! Garnet, help! She shouted, looking back and stumbling as she ran. Norma was dressed in a blue robe and slippers. Her gray hair was tousled and her face was contorted with horror. She ran unevenly, clutching her left side with her hand. Apparently her heart was hurting or she was simply out of breath. Her son Denver tumbled out of the house behind her. A man of about 45, unshaven, wearing a dirty t-shirt with holes and stretched jeans. He was holding an aluminum baseball bat, his face contorted with rage. I could tell right away that he was drunk. His gait was unsteady, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was babbling something incomprehensible. Denver worked here and there, as a loader, a mechanic's assistant, a janitor, but never stayed anywhere for long. He mostly drank away the money his mother earned cleaning offices. "Where's the money, you old hag?" "Ow!" he yelled, waving the bat above his head. "I know you're hiding it. You think I'm stupid?" His voice was hoarse, his words slurred. It was clear that he had been drinking heavily, probably since morning, or maybe even since the night before. Norma tripped over the garden hose and fell onto the grass near the fence separating our properties. The fence was wooden, about 6 feet high, painted white, with the paint peeling in places. Norma was lying on her side, breathing heavily and clutching her chest. Denver was approaching her, and I realized I couldn't delay. I dropped the pot of seedlings I was holding, grabbed the shovel I had just been using to loosen the soil, and headed for the fence. The shovel was heavy with a wooden handle and a steel blade, a reliable tool that I had been using for 15 years. "Hey, Denver!" I shouted, trying to sound firm and loud. "Leave my mother alone." He stopped and slowly turned toward me. His face was swollen, his beard unshaven for a week, his eyes red and angry. His t-shirt was stained with food and, judging by the smell, alcohol. He reeked of booze. "What are you getting at, old man?" he growled, swaying on his feet. "It's none of your business." "She's my mother, and I'll do what I want with her." "Norma, get up and run into the house," I shouted to my neighbor, but she lay on the ground and didn't move, only breathing heavily. Denver looked at me with contempt and swung his bat. He hit the wooden fence with all his might where the boards were thinner. There was a loud crack, and 2 boards flew apart in splinters. He hit it again, and a gap almost a meter wide formed in the fence. "Now I'll show you how not to mind your own business," he hissed, climbing over the broken fence onto my property. Denver stepped onto my land, breathing heavily and clutching the bat with both hands. Despite his drunkenness, he was a big man, taller than me, broader in the shoulders, and about 20 years younger. When sober, he could have easily crushed me. I gripped the shovel handle tighter and braced myself for a fight. In my youth, I had boxed in the army and even competed, but that was over 40 years ago. Now I was 65, and although I was in fairly good health, I didn't have the strength I used to. However, there was nowhere to retreat. Between us and the house was a garden bed with freshly planted tomatoes, and behind us was a shed. Denver staggered toward me, bat in hand. The alcohol clearly affected his coordination, but it didn't diminish his anger. "You think I'm afraid of you, old man?" he yelled. "I'll show you how to talk to old farts." He swung the bat, aiming for my head. I instinctively jumped to the side and the aluminum bat whizzed past my head, grazing the edge of my old baseball cap. I felt the wind from the blow on my skin, a little closer, and it would have hit me on the temple. While Denver was regaining his balance after his miss, I swung the shovel and hit him on the head with the flat side. I was aiming for his temple, but I hit him just above it, on the top of his head. It was a strong blow. After all, my hands are still strong from many years of working in a factory, and my anger gave me extra strength. Denver staggered, dropped the bat, which fell to the ground with a clang, and grabbed his head with both hands. "Fuck!" he groaned and fell to his knees. Blood from the wound on his head flowed between his fingers. I quickly jumped on him, twisted his arms behind his back, and pinned him to the ground, pressing my knee into his back. He tried to break free, cursing and threatening me with violence, but his strength had already left him, and I had no trouble keeping him on the ground. "Norma!" I shouted to my neighbor. "Call the police! Hurry!" Norma somehow got to her feet, dusted off her robe, and hobbled toward her house. She moved slowly, holding onto the fence, but it was clear that she wasn't seriously injured. She had just been scared and fallen. Denver lay beneath me and continued to curse, but more quietly now. His head must have been hurting because he groaned several times. The bleeding had stopped. The wound wasn't as serious as it had seemed at first. "Let me go, you old goat," he muttered. "I'll show you." "Lie still," I replied. "The police will be here soon, and you'll explain everything to them." 15 minutes later, a police car pulled up to the house and two officers got out. Sergeant Miller, whom I had known since I was a boy, and a young constable whose name I didn't remember. Miller was the son of our former neighbor and attended the same school as my daughters, only a few years younger. "What happened here, Mr. Rivers?" Miller asked as he approached us. I briefly recounted what had happened. The constable handcuffed Denver and helped him to his feet. He swayed and mumbled something incomprehensible, but he no longer resisted. "This isn't the first call about Denver Belcher," Sergeant Miller said. "This time he'll definitely be locked up for a few months for assault and property damage. Do you have any witnesses?" I pointed to Norma, who was standing on her porch watching what was happening. Miller approached her and took her statement. Then he photographed the broken fence and asked me to write a statement. "Mr. Rivers, do you need to see a doctor?" asked the constable. "Maybe you have some bruises or something hurts?" I examined myself. There were no injuries, only a slight ache in my back from having to hold Denver down. "No, I'm fine," I replied, "but he should be taken to the hospital to have his head checked." They put Denver in the car and drove away. I was left alone on the property and began to assess the damage. The fence had been seriously damaged. 3 boards were completely broken, and 2 more were cracked. It could be repaired in a couple of hours if I went to the hardware store for new boards. Much worse was the fact that when Denver fell, he crushed 2 tomato bushes that I had been tending all spring. I picked up the broken pots and threw them in the trash. I carefully planted the remaining seedlings, finishing the job I had started. By noon, the whole garden bed was ready, and 22 tomato seedlings stood in neat rows, tied to stakes. About an hour later, when I was already having lunch in the kitchen, Norma knocked on my door. In her hands, she was carrying an apple pie, still warm from the oven, and a jar of homemade jam. "Garnet, I don't know how to thank you," she said, handing me the treats. "You're a real hero. I'm afraid to even think what he would have done to me if you hadn't intervened." Norma looked much better than she had in the morning. She had changed into a clean dress, combed her hair, and even put on a little makeup. But her hands were shaking as she held the pie. "Come in, Norma," I said. "Let's have some tea." We sat down at the old oak table in the kitchen, and I made some strong black tea. Norma told me what I already knew, but now I heard the details. Denver hadn't been able to find a steady job for over 2 years, was drinking more, and was becoming increasingly aggressive. It started with small requests to borrow $20 until payday to help with the rent. Then the requests became demands, and the demands became threats. "He knows I have a little savings," Norma said, stirring sugar into her tea. "I've worked my whole life, saving every dollar. I wanted to leave him something after I died, and now he wants it all now, for booze." For the past 6 months, Denver had been demanding money from his mother almost every week. When she refused, he would make a scene, yell, and break furniture. Several times the neighbors called the police, but Norma didn't file a report. He was her son after all. "And today he completely lost his mind," she continued. "He woke up drunk and started yelling that I was hiding money from him. He started threatening me with a bat he found in the garage. I was so scared that I ran out of the house. I think it would be good for him to spend some time in jail," I said. "Maybe that would bring him to his senses." "God willing," sighed Norma. "I don't have the strength to fight him anymore. At his age, it's time for him to earn his own money, not extort it from his mother. His father was already a foreman at a factory at 45, had his own house, and was raising children. After my neighbor left, I ate a piece of pie for dinner. It was very tasty, with cinnamon and vanilla, and thought about how lucky I was with my children. Ruby became a nurse, lives her own life in Tulsa, never asked me for money, on the contrary. Sometimes she tries to help me financially, although I refuse. Charlene is married and raising 2 wonderful children, and although I don't always like Braxton, he's too hot-headed and likes to drink beer with his friends. He works honestly and supports his family as best he can. Of course, sometimes they ask for help buying clothes for their grandchildren for the new school year, or paying for unexpected expenses. car repairs, doctor's bills. But that's normal. That's what grandfathers are for. They never demanded money from me, never threatened me, never made a scene. They always asked politely and thanked me for my help. In the evening, around 7 o'clock, Charlene's beat-up beige Honda Civic pulled up to the house. The car was old, about 10 years old, with a dent in the rear fender and suspicious noises coming from the engine. But it ran well. My grandchildren, 12-year-old Tyler and 9-year-old Casey, jumped out of the car. Tyler was almost as tall as me, thin with his mother's dark hair and a serious expression on his face. He was a quiet child who loved to read and was interested in baseball. He did well in school, especially in math and science. Casey was the complete opposite of her brother. Small, with her father's blonde hair, very lively and talkative. She took dance lessons, loved to draw, and could talk for hours about all sorts of nonsense. "Grandpa," Casey shouted, throwing her arms around my neck, "is it true that you beat up the bad uncle today?" Apparently, news travels fast in our small town. By evening, the whole neighborhood knew about the fight with Denver. "How do you know?" I asked, hugging my granddaughter and inhaling the scent of her strawberry-scented shampoo. "Miss Harper told Mom at the store," Tyler replied, approaching us more cautiously. "She said you hit him over the head with a shovel and they took him away in a police car." "Tyler, watch your language," Charlene scolded her son as she approached us. Her daughter looked tired and worried. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was carelessly tied back in a ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She was dressed in old jeans and a worn t-shirt. Charlene usually took care of her appearance, even when money was tight. "Dad, can the kids stay with you tonight?" she asked, not looking me in the eye. "I need to discuss something with Braxton." Something important. I looked at my daughter more closely. Something in her voice alarmed me. She was speaking too quickly, nervously fiddling with the strap of her purse. But I didn't ask her in front of the children. "Of course," I replied. "There's always room for them here." Charlene kissed the children goodbye, told them to listen to their grandfather, and said she would pick them up tomorrow morning after breakfast. My grandchildren and I waved to her until the old Honda disappeared around the bend, sputtering exhaust fumes. "Grandpa, what's for dinner?" Casey asked when we got inside. "Mrs. Belcher's apple pie," I replied, "and I'll make you some eggs and bacon." The children were delighted and ran to wash their hands. I took the eggs and bacon out of the refrigerator and turned on the stove. While I was cooking, my grandchildren told me about school and their friends. Tyler was into baseball and dreamed of making the school team next year, but the coach said he needed to train more and build muscle. Casey took dance classes at a local studio and had recently performed in a school concert dressed as a butterfly. "You know, Grandpa," Casey chattered as she ate her eggs, "Mom cried all day today." She thought I couldn't see her, but I did. Tyler looked at his sister reproachfully. "Casey, you don't need to talk about that." "Why not?" the girl asked in surprise. "You're not a stranger." I decided not to ask the children about their parents' problems. Whatever was going on between Charlene and Braxton would be cleared up tomorrow. After dinner, we watched cartoons on TV. Some story about talking animals. Then we played board games that I had bought especially for my grandchildren. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, I put them to bed. Tyler on the fold-out sofa in the living room, and Casey in Ruby's bedroom, where there was a narrow bed. I went to bed late, around 11, but couldn't fall asleep for a long time. I kept thinking about what Charlene and Braxton could have discussed that was so important that they had to take the children away from home, and why my daughter looked so upset. In the morning, I woke up at 6:30 as usual, but the house was unusually quiet until I remembered that my grandchildren had spent the night there. Tyler and Casey were still asleep, and I decided not to wake them up early. I made breakfast for 3, pancakes with maple syrup, which the kids loved, scrambled eggs, and fresh orange juice. When my grandchildren woke up around 8 in the morning, we had a quiet breakfast, and I packed their things. Casey was chattering away as usual, telling me about a dream she had in which she was flying on a rainbow unicorn, while Tyler was focused and silent. I noticed that the boy looked worried and asked several times if his mother was angry with him for something. "Grandpa, why was Mom so sad yesterday?" Casey asked as we drove to their house in my old Ford pickup truck. "I don't know, sweetie," I replied honestly. "She was probably just tired." Charlene's apartment was in an old 2-story house on Elm Street, a 20-minute drive from my house. The house was built in the 1950s and needed some repairs, but the rent was inexpensive. $400 a month for a two-room apartment on the first floor. Charlene and Braxton had a bedroom. The children slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room, and the kitchen was very small but functional. When we pulled up to the house, it was around 9 in the morning. I noticed that Braxton's car, an old red Chevrolet pickup truck, wasn't in the parking lot, but I figured he had already left for work. The workday at the warehouse started at 8 in the morning, so that made sense. The kids jumped out of the car and ran toward the house. I grabbed their backpacks and followed. At the door, I heard loud voices coming from inside the apartment. Someone was yelling, and it was definitely Braxton, so he hadn't gone to work. Tyler froze at the door, hesitating to go in. Casey also stopped, clinging to her brother. I walked over to them and knocked gently on the door. "Charlene," I called. "It's us. We brought the kids." The shouting inside stopped for a few seconds. Then I heard quick footsteps. Charlene opened the door, and I could see right away that she had been crying. Her eyes were red, there were tear tracks on her cheeks, and her hair was tousled. She was wearing the same old robe she had on last night. "Dad," she said quietly, "maybe you should take the kids back." Braxton and I haven't finished talking yet, but Braxton was already behind her. He was shirtless, wearing only jeans, unshaven, his hair tousled. He smelled of beer and cigarettes. His face was angry, his fists clenched. "What the hell brought them here?" he barked at me. "I told you to let them stay with you." "Braxton, don't yell in front of the kids," Charlene asked, but her voice was shaking. "I'll yell when I want to," he yelled. "This is my house and I'm the boss here." I took my grandchildren by the hands and gently moved them away from the door. "Kids, go to the car," I said calmly. "Wait for me there." Tyler nodded and pulled his sister toward the pickup truck. Casey looked back, not understanding what was going on, but obediently followed her brother. When they were far enough away, I entered the apartment. Inside, it was a mess. Shards of a broken plate lay on the floor, a chair was overturned, and empty beer cans stood on the kitchen table. The windows were closed, the air was stuffy, and it smelled of tobacco and alcohol. "What's going on here?" I asked. "Can't you see?" Braxton yelled, pointing at Charlene. "This idiot spent the money I left for groceries. She just took $150 and spent it on nonsense." "I bought the kids' clothes for the summer," Charlene said quietly. "Casey's sandals are falling apart, and Tyler's shorts are too small." The kids," Braxton mimicked her. "And what do we have to eat?" "The fridge is empty, we have no money, and you're spending it on rags." He grabbed an empty beer can from the table and threw it at the wall. The can bounced off and rolled across the floor with a metallic clang. "Braxton, calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We can discuss everything calmly." "Shut up," he barked at me. "This is family business, none of your damn business." He turned to Charlene and took a step toward her. My daughter instinctively backed away toward the wall. "Where did you get the money, huh?" Braxton continued to shout. "I told you, it's for food." "For food, do you understand?" "The children have outgrown their old clothes," Charlene repeated, and I heard the desperation in her voice. "What was I supposed to do?" "They couldn't go to school in torn sandals." "They could," he yelled. "I wore shoes with holes in them when I was a kid, and it was fine. You're a spoiled princess, used to having Daddy buy you everything." I felt anger boiling up inside me, but I tried to hold back. I couldn't yell and scream in front of the children, even if they were sitting in the car. "Braxton," I said as calmly as possible, "if you need money for groceries, I can help." There's no need to argue about it. "No need?" He turned to me and I saw real anger in his eyes. "Who asked you? I can feed my family myself. I don't need your handouts." "Then why are you yelling at your wife for buying the kids the things they need?" I couldn't hold back. That was a mistake. Braxton went completely berserk. "Because she's a stupid cow," he yelled. "A stupid cow who can't count money. She thinks I load sacks of dollars at the factory." He grabbed another beer can from the table and threw it into the kitchen sink. The can hit the faucet and bounced off, splashing beer all over the sink. "Braxton, stop it," Charlene asked, but her voice was even quieter now. "Stop it?" he mimicked. "And you stop spending my money on nonsense. Stop thinking you're the queen here." He moved very close to her, looming over her. Charlene pressed her back against the wall and lowered her eyes. How many times have I told you? Every dollar counts. Braxton continued to yell. And what are you doing? Going to the store and buying all kinds of junk. It's not junk, Charlene said softly. It's clothes for our children. Ours? Braxton laughed maliciously. Maybe then you'll find a job and buy them clothes with your own money? I am looking for a job, his daughter replied, but no one will hire me yet. Looking, he snorted. Sitting at home on the couch, watching TV. That's how you're looking. And I'm slaving away in the warehouse to feed you. I could see that Charlene was about to cry again. She stood against the wall, curled up in a ball, and said nothing. Braxton enjoyed his superiority as he loomed over her. And anyway, he continued, I've had enough of this shit. Enough of your tears and complaints. Either you start living like a human being, or... He didn't finish, but raised his hand. I knew what was about to happen and took a step forward. Braxton, I said firmly, calm down. But he wasn't listening anymore. He swung his arm and slapped Charlene hard across the face, knocking her head against the wall. The sound of the blow echoed through the room. My daughter clutched her cheek, tears streaming from her eyes. A red handprint appeared on her white skin. I don't remember how I ended up next to Braxton. The next second, my fist met his jaw. The blow was short but powerful. That's how I was taught in the Army 40 years ago. Braxton flew backward, tripped over an overturned chair, and fell to the floor. Get out of the house, I said, standing over him. Now. He lay on the floor, holding his jaw, and looked at me in surprise. He probably didn't expect an old man to be able to pack such a punch. What are you doing, you old goat? He muttered as he got to his feet. I'm protecting my daughter from you, I replied. Pack your things and leave. And don't let me see you here again. This is my house, Braxton yelled. I pay the rent. Not anymore, I said calmly. Leave voluntarily or I'll call the police and tell them how you beat your wife. Braxton rubbed his jaw, spat blood on the floor, and looked at me with hatred. Then he turned his gaze to Charlene, who was still standing by the wall, pressing her hand to her cheek. You'll regret this, he said to her. Without me, you'll all starve to death here. He went into the bedroom, and from there came the sounds of cupboards being opened and something falling to the floor. 10 minutes later, he came out with a large sports bag, threw the apartment keys on the floor, and headed for the door. See you in court, he said as he left. And I'll take the children away from you. You can be sure of that. The door slammed and the apartment fell silent. Charlene slowly sank into a kitchen chair and began to cry. Quietly, hopelessly. I sat down next to her and put my arms around her shoulders. It's over, I said. He won't hurt you anymore. Dad, she sobbed, I was so scared. He was getting worse and worse, angrier and angrier. I thought sooner or later he would kill me. Why didn't you tell me? I was ashamed, my daughter admitted. You warned me that he wasn't the right person for me, but I didn't listen. I thought love would conquer all. Indeed, when Charlene met Braxton at the age of 19, I knew right away that nothing good would come of it. He was 5 years older than her, already had a drinking problem, and worked odd jobs. But my daughter was in love and wouldn't listen to anyone. How long has he been beating you? I asked. 1.5 years, Charlene replied quietly. At first, only when he was drunk. Then he started doing it when he was sober. He said I was driving him crazy, that I was a bad wife. I felt the rage rising in me again. If Braxton were here now, I would kill him. Charlene, I said, you have to file for divorce. Right away. I know, she nodded. I've already decided. I'll go to a lawyer tomorrow. I'll help you, I promised. With a lawyer, with money, with the kids. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. We tidied up the apartment, swept up the broken glass, put the chair back in its place, threw away the empty beer cans. Then I went to the car to get my grandchildren. Where's Daddy? Tyler asked when we entered the house. Daddy's gone, Charlene replied, trying to sound calm. He's going to live separately. Forever? Casey asked. Yes, sweetie. Forever. The children listened in silence. Tyler nodded as if he had been expecting the news, while Casey frowned, thinking about what she had heard. Are we going to live here? The girl asked. For now, yes, her mother replied. We'll see. I spent a couple more hours with them, helping Charlene make a list of things that needed to be decided in the coming days. Divorce, alimony, work. When the children sat down to watch cartoons, my daughter and I talked about money. Dad, I don't want to be a burden to you, Charlene said. You're not a burden, I replied. You're my daughter, and they're my grandchildren. For now, I'll help with the rent and groceries, and you'll find a job. Thank you, she whispered and started crying again. I got home in the middle of the day, but I couldn't settle down. I kept thinking about what had happened and was angry at myself. Why hadn't I noticed earlier that Braxton might be beating his wife? Were there signs that I didn't notice? In the evening, around 7, I went to the road home, a small diner on Main Street where I usually met my best friend, Coder Minton. We had been friends since school, served in the Army together, and then worked at the same factory. He as a mechanic, I as a mechanic. Coder retired the same year I did, and now we met 2 or 3 times a week to have dinner and discuss the news. Coder was already sitting in our usual corner, having ordered coffee and a slice of apple pie. He was 2 years older than me, short, stocky, with a gray beard and kind brown eyes. His wife had died before mine, and he had no children, so he lived all alone in a small house on the outskirts of town. Garnet, he said when I sat down at the table, you look like you've been run over by a train. What happened? I ordered coffee and a hamburger and told my friend everything that had happened that morning. Coder listened silently, only occasionally shaking his head. Son of a bitch, he said when I finished. Too bad you didn't break his jaw. I think so too, I admitted. He beat my daughter for 1.5 years and I didn't even know. How could you have known? Coder objected. She kept it a secret. These women always think that a man will change, that love will fix him. We had dinner and discussed what would happen next. Coder offered his help. He knew a lawyer named Stephen Clark who specialized in divorce cases. Clark is a smart guy, Coder said. He'll help you get everything in order so that bastard can't take the kids away from you. Do you think he'll try? I asked. Definitely, my friend nodded. Guys like that always seek revenge. He'll demand custody despite his ex-wife. We agreed that Coder would call Clark tomorrow and set up a meeting. Then I told him about yesterday's fight with Denver Belcher, and Coder laughed. You're a real warrior, Garnet, he said. You took down 2 guys in 2 days. At our age, that's quite an achievement. I returned home around 9 in the evening, feeling exhausted. It had been a difficult day, but the right decisions had been made. Charlene was finally free from her tyrant, and her children would no longer have to watch their father beat their mother. Now the main thing was to help her daughter get back on her feet and start a new life. Lawyer Stephen Clark turned out to be a sensible man in his 50s, with gray temples and a calm voice. Coder was right in his recommendation. Clark took on Charlene's case and promised to get the divorce done quickly and without unnecessary complications. His fee was $1,500, which I paid without hesitation. Mr. Rivers, Clark said during our first meeting, your son-in-law has no real grounds for demanding custody of the children. His unstable job, alcohol problems, and incidents of domestic violence all work against him. But he may try to complicate the process out of revenge. That's exactly what happened. Braxton hired a cheap lawyer and demanded joint custody, claiming that Charlene was incapable of providing for the children without his help. He even filed a counterclaim, accusing his wife of turning the children against him and spending the family's money on unnecessary purchases. But Clark worked professionally. He gathered testimony from neighbors who had heard shouting and arguments coming from Charlene's apartment, obtained a doctor's note about the bruises that his daughter had hidden under makeup, and presented the court with a complete picture of what was happening in the family. Braxton failed to appear at several hearings because he was drunk, and once caused a scene right in the courtroom. The divorce was finalized 2 months later, in early August. Charlene was granted full custody of the children, and Braxton was given the right to see them on weekends under my supervision. The court awarded child support of $300 a month, but I knew right away that my daughter would hardly ever see that money. After the divorce, Braxton drank himself into oblivion, lost his job at the warehouse, and scraped by on odd jobs. All this time, I supported Charlene and my grandchildren entirely on my own. The rent for the apartment was $400 a month, utilities were about $150, and groceries were $300 to $400 a month. Plus, there were clothes for the children, school supplies, and medical expenses. In total, it came to about $1,000 a month, but that wasn't critical for my budget. My pension was $1,400 a month, plus I had savings. about $30,000 in my bank account. I had been saving this money my whole life for a rainy day, and now that day had come. Dolores always said that money should work for the family, not sit dead in the bank. The first month after the divorce, Charlene was depressed and confused. She hardly left the house, cried a lot, and often sat by the window staring into space. I understood that she needed time to recover from everything she had been through. Divorce, even from a husband like Braxton, is stressful. You can't erase 13 years of living together from your memory in a single day. I helped as best I could. Every morning, I took my grandchildren to school in my pickup truck, and in the afternoon, I picked them up and took them home. I bought them new backpacks, notebooks, pencils, everything they needed for the new school year. Tyler started 7th grade and Casey started 4th grade. Both were good students, and their teacher's only complaint was that Tyler was sometimes distracted in class. The boy is upset about his parents' divorce, his homeroom teacher, Mrs. Davis, explained to me. It's a normal reaction. The main thing is to provide stability at home. I provided stability. Every weekend, my grandchildren stayed with me, and we went to the movies, went fishing, and played baseball in the yard. I bought Casey new dance shoes and Tyler a baseball glove he had been dreaming about for a long time. The children gradually returned to normal, getting used to their new life without their father. Charlene, however, was recovering more slowly. She was really depressed for the first few weeks, but by the end of August, her mood had improved. She started spending more time in front of the mirror, paying attention to her appearance, and even made an appointment with a hairdresser. "Dad," she said to me one day in early September, "I want to find a job, but first I need to get myself in order. I've really let myself go over the years. It was a sensible decision. Indeed, the years of living with Braxton had left their mark on my daughter. She had lost weight, aged, and stopped caring about her appearance. If she wanted to find a normal job, she had to look the part. I gave her $200 to update her wardrobe and buy cosmetics. Charlene bought 2 blouses, a skirt, shoes, and went to a beauty salon. She came back transformed, with a new haircut, manicure, and makeup. She looked 10 years younger. "What do you think?" she asked, twirling in front of the mirror in the hallway. "Very beautiful," I replied honestly. "Now you can look for a job." But the job search dragged on. Charlene went to several interviews, at stores, offices, even the local hospital for a position as a registrar. But everywhere they required work experience or special education, which she did not have. "Dad," she complained, "everywhere wants people with degrees, and I only have a high school diploma." "Then go study," I suggested. "The community college has courses for accountants and secretaries." "That's 2 years of study," Charlene sighed. "Who's going to feed the children?" "I will," I replied. "The main thing is that you have a profession." But my daughter was in no hurry to enroll in the courses. Instead, she spent more and more time in the city, meeting with friends and going shopping. Every week, something new appeared. Face cream, new lipstick, another blouse. In October, I noticed that Charlene's expenses had increased. She used to ask for $200 or $300 a month for personal needs, but now she needed $400 or $500. She gave various explanations. The children needed winter clothes, her hairdryer had broken, she had run out of shampoo. "Dad, I found a great anti-wrinkle cream," she said one day, showing me a small jar. "It only costs $80, but it works wonders." $80 for a cream seemed a bit expensive to me, but I kept quiet. Women need to look good, especially when they're looking for a job. In November, Charlene joined a gym. "I need to get in shape," she explained. "I've gained 10 kilograms over the years of marriage." The gym membership cost $70 a month, plus sportswear and sneakers, another $150. Then she needed a massage to recover after training, $50 per session. "Charlene," I said to her at the end of November, "maybe it's time to start looking for a job seriously, or sign up for some classes." "Dad," she replied, "I'm not ready psychologically yet. I need time to fully recover from everything I've been through. Divorce is a serious trauma." She meant it sincerely, and I couldn't disagree with her. Indeed, 13 years of living with a tyrant do not pass without a trace. But I was beginning to worry about how easily my daughter was spending my money. In December, the situation worsened. Charlene met a group of women at the gym who regularly met at a cafe after their workouts. These meetings also cost money: coffee, desserts, sometimes lunches. Plus, my daughter started going to the beauty salon more often. Manicures, pedicures, styling. Dad, I need to maintain my social connections, she explained. Maybe through these women I'll find a job. One of them works at a bank, another at an insurance company. It sounded logical, but my daughter never found a job through her new acquaintances. Instead, her expenses continued to grow. By Christmas, Charlene was spending about $700 a month on personal needs, not counting rent, utilities, and groceries. Maybe you should try working as a salesperson, I suggested in January. No experience is required and the salary is small, but it's something. Dad, Charlene sighed, I can't work for minimum wage. You can't support two children on $700 a month. But it's better than earning nothing at all, I argued. Why should I work for pennies when you can help? She asked in surprise. I'd rather find something decent. That answer alarmed me. There was a tone in my daughter's voice that I didn't like. She spoke as if my help was something to be taken for granted, rather than temporary support in a difficult situation. In February, Charlene went to her first job interview in 6 months, at a local real estate company. But a day later, it became clear that the job wasn't right for her. Instead, that same month, she signed up for a course of skin rejuvenation treatments with a cosmetologist. 12 sessions at $80 each. I'm 38 years old, my daughter explained. If I want to find a good job, I have to look young and attractive. By spring, I realized that something was wrong. In the 8 months since the divorce, I had spent about $9,000 on Charlene and my grandchildren. It was a considerable amount, and most importantly, I saw no progress in her job search. My daughter had transformed into a well-groomed, beautiful woman who went to the gym every day, regularly visited the beauty salon, and met her friends in cafes. But she had no intention of working. Charlene, I said to her in March, it's been 8 months. Maybe it's time to take any job and then look for something better. Dad, she replied in a tone that sounded irritated, I can't just work anywhere. I have children and a reputation. I'll find something suitable. I just need a little more time. How much time? I asked bluntly. I don't know, my daughter shrugged, until I find it. That same evening, I met with Coder at our usual diner and told him about my doubts. Garnet, my friend said, I think your daughter is too comfortable. Why should she work when her dad pays for everything? But she is looking for a job, I objected. She goes to interviews. She goes just for show, Coder shook his head. A real mother of two children would go to work as a saleswoman, a waitress, a cleaner, anything to avoid living off her father. My friend's words hurt me because deep down I thought the same thing, but admitting it to myself was painful. It turned out that my daughter was taking advantage of my kindness and had no intention of becoming independent. What should I do? I asked. Give her an ultimatum, Coder replied. Give her a month to find a job, any job. And if she doesn't find one, stop financial support. What about the children? I asked. What are they guilty of? The children won't go missing, my friend said confidently. When their mother realizes that the free ride is over, she'll quickly find a way to feed them. I drove home deep in thought. On the one hand, Coder was right. Charlene had become too relaxed over the past few months. On the other hand, she was still my daughter, and my grandchildren were my flesh and blood. How could I leave them without help? But the numbers spoke for themselves. In the 8 months since her divorce, my daughter hadn't earned a dollar, but she had spent almost $9,000 of my dollars, and she was spending more and more. If in August she needed $1,000 a month, now she needed $1,500. My savings were dwindling. Of the $30,000, just over $20,000 remained. At this rate, in a year I would have to go into debt or sell the house. That evening, I sat in Dolores's chair for a long time and thought about what my wife would have done in this situation. Dolores was a wise woman. She would have found the right solution. She would probably have talked to our daughter frankly, without beating around the bush, and explained to her that help should be temporary, not permanent. But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I still hoped that Charlene would understand and find a job on her own. Maybe she really did need a little more time. The next 3 months followed the same pattern. Charlene continued to live off my money, showing little enthusiasm in her search for work. Sometimes she mentioned that she had called some company or sent out a resume, but it rarely led to actual interviews. On the other hand, her expenses grew steadily. In April, my daughter signed up for makeup classes, $120 for 8 sessions. In May, she bought a new summer wardrobe, $300 for dresses, blouses, and shoes. In June, she decided she needed a personal trainer at the gym because group classes weren't effective enough. Personal training cost $80 an hour, and Charlene went to the trainer twice a week. Dad, I need to stay in good shape, she explained. When I find a job, I have to look my best. I was starting to lose patience, but I kept paying. After all, the expenses for my daughter and grandchildren were still within my budget, although my savings continued to dwindle. By June, there was just over $15,000 left in the account out of the original $30,000. My grandchildren had gotten used to their new life. Tyler finished 7th grade with good grades and signed up for summer baseball league. I bought him a new uniform and a professional bat for $150. Casey continued to dance and was preparing for a summer concert. She needed a special costume for $80 and new dance shoes. The children were happy. They got everything they wanted without asking too many questions about where the money came from. For them, their grandfather was an inexhaustible source of good things. He bought them toys, sweets, clothes, paid for clubs and entertainment. They got used to this life and considered it normal. But what bothered me most was Charlene's behavior. In the years since the divorce, she had changed dramatically. From a frightened, tormented woman, she had turned into a confident lady who went to the gym every day, met with friends in cafes, and spent money on all kinds of pleasures. She clearly enjoyed her new life and had no intention of changing anything. I like who I've become, she confessed to me at the end of May. For the first time in many years, I feel truly free and happy. I understood her feelings, but I was concerned that this freedom and happiness were being paid for out of my pocket. My daughter took my help for granted, never thanked me, and never asked about my financial situation. In June, something happened that finally opened my eyes. I arrived as usual to pick up my grandchildren for the weekend and saw an unfamiliar car parked near Charlene's house. A bright red Ford pickup truck, obviously new, with shiny chrome details and leather seats. "Whose car is that?" I asked Tyler, who ran out to meet me. "Mom's," the boy replied proudly. "She bought it yesterday." "Cool, huh?" I felt the ground slip away from under my feet. A new pickup truck cost at least $20,000 to $25,000. Where could Charlene have gotten that kind of money? My daughter came out of the house wearing a new summer dress and sunglasses. "Do you like it?" she asked, pointing to the pickup truck. "I've been dreaming about a car like this for a long time." "Charlene," I said, trying to sound calm, "where did you get the money for this car?" "I took out a loan," she replied casually, as if she were talking about buying a loaf of bread. "The bank said that with my income, I could afford such a purchase." "What income?" I didn't understand. "You don't work." "Well, I said I get help from relatives." My daughter shrugged. "The bank counted it as a stable income." I was shocked. It turned out that Charlene had taken out a loan, listing my financial assistance as her income. And now the bank would require her to make monthly payments that she clearly couldn't make on her own. "How much does she have to pay per month?" I asked. $450, Charlene replied. "But that's not a problem, right, Dad?" I realized that she expected me to agree to pay for this loan too. It was natural for her. If Grandpa helps with rent and groceries, he'll help with the car too. "Charlene, I need to talk to you," I said. "Kids, go inside." The grandchildren ran off to play in the yard, and we were left alone by the brand new pickup truck. "Do you realize what you're doing?" I asked my daughter. "You took out a loan for a car you can't afford." "Why can't I?" Charlene asked, surprised. "I need a reliable car to drive to job interviews. My old Honda is falling apart." "A car for $5,000 to $7,000 would be fine for looking for a job," I argued, "but you bought a pickup truck for $25,000. "Dad," my daughter said in a tone you use to explain something to a child, "cheap cars break down all the time. I have children. I need safety and reliability." "And who's going to pay the loan?" I asked bluntly. Charlene looked at me in surprise, as if I had asked a stupid question. "Well, you're helping for now," she said, "and when I find a job, I'll pay for it myself." "What if you don't find a job in the next few months?" "I will," my daughter replied confidently. "Sooner or later, I will." I realized that the conversation was going nowhere. Charlene saw no problem in taking out a loan for money she didn't have. She was absolutely sure that I would continue to support her. "Dad," she continued, "if you're worried about money, you don't have to buy me clothes and cosmetics anymore. You can just pay for the essentials, rent, utilities, and the car loan. At that point, I was completely speechless. Not only had my daughter spent $25,000 without my knowledge, but she was also dictating to me what I should and shouldn't pay for. Charlene, I said, I've been supporting you and the kids for over a year. I've already spent over $15,000, and all this time you haven't been working. I'm looking for a suitable job, she replied. I can't go to McDonald's for $7 an hour. Why not? I asked. $7 an hour is $1,200 a month, plus tips. That's enough to cover some of the expenses. My daughter looked at me as if I had suggested she become a prostitute. Dad, I have a certain social status, she said. I can't work in fast food. What will my friends think of me? What will they think of you living off your father's money? I couldn't help asking. They think I have a rich dad who helps his daughter through a difficult period in her life, Charlene replied without a hint of embarrassment. And there's nothing wrong with that. I realized that we were speaking different languages. For me, helping my family was a temporary measure in a critical situation. For my daughter, it had become a way of life that she had no intention of changing. Charlene, I said slowly, what will happen if I can no longer help you? My daughter's expression changed. Her carefree attitude disappeared, and her eyes became cold. What do you mean? She asked. My savings are not infinite, I explained. In 1 year, I spent half of the money I had saved my entire life on you. Dad, Charlene said, a steely note creeping into her voice, you understand that the children are used to a certain standard of living, don't you? They go to a good school, play sports, take dance lessons, and have everything they need. Yes, I understand, I nodded. And you don't want your grandchildren to suffer because of a lack of money, do you? Of course not. Then what's the problem? Charlene smiled, but it was a cold smile. You'll help us, and I'll look for a job. When I find one, I'll start paying myself. And if you don't find one? My daughter paused for a few seconds, looking me straight in the eye. I will, she repeated, but until I do, you'll help, because otherwise the children will suffer. I sensed a veiled threat in her words. Not direct, but clear enough. If I stopped providing financial support, the children would indeed suffer, and that meant I would be to blame for their suffering. Okay, I said, let's talk about this later. Give me some time to think about it. Sure, Dad, Charlene agreed, and the carefree tone returned to her voice. Just don't think about it too long. The first loan payment is due next month. I picked up my grandchildren and drove home, but I couldn't get over what I had heard the whole way. My daughter, whom I had raised, loved, and protected, was essentially blackmailing me, using the children as leverage. Over the weekend, I tried not to let my grandchildren see how I was feeling. I played with them, cooked meals, and watched cartoons. But my thoughts kept returning to my conversation with Charlene. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had fallen into a trap. My daughter was absolutely certain that I would not be able to refuse her help because I would not want to hurt my grandchildren. And she was right. I was indeed ready to do anything for Tyler and Casey. But it turned out that my love for my grandchildren had become a tool for blackmail. On Sunday evening, when I brought the children home, Charlene met me at the door with a businesslike expression. Dad, I've calculated our expenses for next month, she said, handing me a piece of paper. Rent is $400, utilities are $150, groceries are $400, car loan is $450. That's a total of $1,400. I took the sheet and looked at the neatly written numbers. My daughter had drawn up a real budget, as if she were planning family expenses. Only the money in this budget was mine. Plus unexpected expenses, Charlene continued. Clothes for the kids, school supplies, medical expenses. Another $300 or $400 a month. That comes to almost $1,800, I calculated. Yes, about that, my daughter nodded. But that's just the bare minimum. I've already given up my personal trainer and makeup classes. What a sacrifice, I thought. She gave up a personal trainer that cost more than $600 a month. Charlene, I said, I need to think about it. What do you need to think about? She asked, surprised. The children need to eat, live in normal conditions, and drive to school in a reliable car. These are basic needs. Basic needs can be met with less money, I objected. My daughter's face hardened. Dad, she said slowly, if you want to continue seeing your grandchildren, you have to pay our expenses, including the car loan. There it was, an open threat. No more hints or innuendo. Either I pay or I lose my grandchildren. You're blackmailing me with the children, I stated. I'm protecting my children's interests, Charlene replied. And if you're not willing to help them, then we have nothing to talk about. I turned and walked to the car without saying a word. My daughter shouted after me, "Think carefully, Dad. You have a week." I was in shock the whole way home. In a year, my daughter had become a completely different person. From a grateful woman who asked for help in a difficult situation, she had become a brazen egoist who considered my money to be hers by right. At home, I sat in my chair for a long time, trying to understand where I had gone wrong. When did this transformation begin? Maybe I was too generous or too soft? Did I give her money without any conditions or demands? On Tuesday evening, I met with Coder at our usual diner and told him about my conversation with Charlene. My friend listened silently, only occasionally shaking his head. "Your daughter has finally become insolent," he said when I finished. "She bought a car for $25,000 and still demands that you pay for it. She's threatening to forbid me from seeing my grandchildren," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "On the one hand, I understand that she's blackmailing me. On the other hand, I can't abandon my grandchildren." Coder took a sip of coffee and looked at me seriously. "Garnet," he said, "if you don't stop this nonsense now, you'll be penniless in a year, and your daughter will find new ways to squeeze money out of you." "But the children won't disappear," my friend interrupted me. "When their mother realizes that the free ride is over, she'll quickly find a job and start feeding them herself." "What if she doesn't?" "She will," Coder said confidently. "A mother's instinct is stronger than laziness. But as long as you feed her, she'll be a burden on you." I knew my friend was right, but it was incredibly difficult to make such a decision. After all, we were talking about my grandchildren, whom I love more than life itself. "What if she really forbids me to see them?" I asked. "Then you'll go to court," Coder replied. "You have grandfather's rights, especially if you can prove that the mother is using the children to blackmail you." We sat in the diner until late in the evening, discussing the situation. Coder made reasonable arguments, but I found them difficult to accept. After all, he was a bachelor and couldn't fully understand the feelings of a grandfather. But by the end of the week, I had made my decision. Charlene had gone too far. Buying a car on credit without my knowledge, budgeting my money, openly threatening to take my grandchildren away from me, all of this was beyond the pale. I would no longer pay my daughter's bills. Let her learn to live independently, like an adult woman. And if she tried to use the children as a tool for blackmail, I would find ways to fight it. The decision was made. All that remained was to find the strength to carry it out. The following Thursday, exactly 1 week after our last conversation, Charlene came to my house. It was around 2 in the afternoon, and I was working in the garden, weeding the carrot beds. Hearing the sound of a car, I turned around and saw a red pickup truck pulling up to the house. My daughter got out of the car in a good mood, wearing a new summer dress and sunglasses. She looked rested and happy with life. She had clearly spent the morning at the gym or the beauty salon. "Hi, Dad," she said, approaching the garden bed. "How are you?" "Fine," I replied without stopping my work. "And you?" "Great," Charlene smiled. "Listen, I need money for this month. The 1st of July is the day after tomorrow, and I have to pay the rent. Here it is, the moment of truth." I stuck the hoe in the ground and straightened up, looking my daughter in the face. "Charlene," I said calmly, "I'm not going to help you with money anymore." The smile on her face slowly faded. "What did you say?" she asked. "I said I won't be paying your bills anymore," I repeated. "No rent, no utilities, no car loan, nothing." Charlene took off her sunglasses and looked at me in confusion. "Dad, is this some kind of joke?" "No, it's not a joke," I replied. "In the last year and a half, I've spent over $17,000 on you, and you haven't earned a cent during that time." "But I'm looking for a job," my daughter objected. "You've been looking for over a year," I said, "and you're spending more and more money. You're buying a $25,000 car, going to the gym, going to beauty salons, meeting your friends at cafes. I need to maintain a certain standard to find a good job." "You can find a good job without a $25,000 car," I replied. "You can work as a salesperson, a waitress, a cleaner. Any honest job is better than living off other people's money." Charlene's face turned red with anger. "I won't work as a cleaner," she shouted. "I have children, a reputation." Then look for another job, I said calmly. But look seriously, not just for show, and live on what you earn yourself. My daughter stood in front of me, her fists clenched, and I could see she was trying to contain her rage. Dad, she said through clenched teeth, you can't just take us and leave us like that. I have children. I'm not abandoning my children, I replied. Tyler and Casey can always come to my house to eat and sleep if they need to. But I'm not going to support a healthy adult woman who doesn't want to work anymore. How am I going to pay rent? Charlene asked. Find a job and pay, I said. Or sell your car and pay with that money while you look for a job. Sell my car. My daughter's voice rose to a scream. Are you crazy? I need a car. You need a car you can afford, I replied, not a $25,000 pickup truck. Charlene paced back and forth in the garden, nervously twisting the strap of her purse. Then she stopped and looked at me with cold anger. Fine, she said slowly. If you don't want to help your grandchildren, you won't see them anymore. That's your decision, I replied, though my heart ached. My decision? Snorted my daughter. You're abandoning them. You're abandoning your grandchildren for money. I'm not abandoning my grandchildren, I repeated. I refuse to support their mother, who doesn't want to work. We can't survive without your money, Charlene shouted. The children will go hungry. Then go to work, I said. The city is full of job openings. A waitress in a diner makes $1,200 a month plus tips. A salesperson in a store makes $1,000. That's enough for rent and groceries. You can't live on that kind of money? Yes, you can, I replied. Millions of people in this country live on salaries like that. And they're fine. They survive. My daughter stood in front of me, her face contorted with anger. I saw hatred in her eyes, real, undisguised hatred. You'll regret this, she hissed. The children will ask where their grandfather is, and I'll tell them that he abandoned us. That money is more important to him than his grandchildren. These words hit me where it hurt the most, but I stood my ground. Say what you want, I replied. When the children grow up, they'll understand the truth. Charlene turned and walked to the car, but halfway there she stopped and turned around. This is the last time I'm asking, she said. Are you going to help or not? No, I replied firmly. My daughter got into the pickup truck, slammed the door, and sped away with a screech of tires. I was left alone in the garden, feeling devastated. It was the right decision, but that didn't make it any easier. The next few days dragged on painfully. I kept thinking about my grandchildren, imagining them asking about their grandfather and Charlene, telling them what a bad person I was. Several times I was tempted to call my daughter, but I held back. Coder was right. If I gave in now, Charlene would realize she could manipulate me as much as she wanted. On Sunday evening, I met a friend at a diner and told him about my conversation with my daughter. You did the right thing, Coder approved. It's tough, but it's right. Now the main thing is not to give up. What if she really won't let me see the kids, or I asked. Then we'll go to a lawyer, my friend replied. Grandfathers have rights, especially if their daughter is using the children to blackmail them. But I hoped it wouldn't come to court. Somewhere deep down, I believed that Charlene would come to her senses, find a job, and everything would work out. A week passed. On Tuesday morning, I was watering the flowers on the porch when I saw a familiar red pickup truck slowly approaching the house. The car stopped, but Charlene didn't get out for a long time. Finally, the door opened, and I saw my daughter. She looked completely different. Her hair was unstyled, she wore no makeup, and she was dressed in old jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. But the most important thing was the expression on her face. Instead of her usual confidence, I saw confusion and despair. Dad, she said, approaching the porch, can we talk? Sure, I replied, continuing to water the flowers. Charlene sat down on the porch steps and wrapped her arms around her knees. I need your help, she said quietly. What kind of help? Money, my daughter admitted. I don't have any money for groceries. The kids have been eating nothing but pasta for 2 days. I put down the watering can and looked at Charlene closely. She really did look bad. She had lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were shaking. What about work? I asked. I haven't found one yet, she replied, but I'm actively looking, I swear. I had 2 interviews yesterday, and one place requires experience as a cashier, the other requires night shifts. Who will stay with the children at night? I sat down next to my daughter on the steps. Charlene, what happened this week? She paused, staring at the ground. I couldn't pay the rent on Monday, she admitted. The landlord gave me until the end of the week. If I don't pay, he'll evict me. What about the car? The first loan payment is also overdue. The bank calls every day threatening to take the car away. That's what buying a car for $25,000 has led to. Charlene had driven herself into a financial trap from which there was no easy way out. What do the kids say? I asked. They ask why Grandpa doesn't come anymore, Charlene replied quietly. Tyler suspects that we've had a falling out, and Casey cries and wants to visit you. My heart ached. I imagined my granddaughter crying, not understanding why her grandfather had disappeared from her life. Where are the children now? I asked. At home, my daughter replied. I told them I was going to the store to buy groceries. Go get them and bring them here, I said. I'll feed them properly. Charlene's face lit up with hope. Thank you, Dad. I knew you wouldn't abandon your grandchildren. I will never abandon my grandchildren, I confirmed. But that doesn't mean I'm going to support you. My daughter's expression changed. So you will help after all? I'll feed the children, I replied. If they're hungry, they can always come to me to eat. But I won't give you any money. Dad, but how will I pay the rent? Find a job, I said. Any job. But I don't have time to look, Charlotte exclaimed. We have to pay the rent urgently or they'll evict us. Then sell something, I suggested. Jewelry, clothes, appliances. That's pennies, my daughter dismissed. Pennies are better than nothing. Charlene sat for a few more minutes, trying to find arguments that would make me change my mind. But I was adamant. Okay, she said finally. I'll go get the kids. Half an hour later, the red pickup truck returned. Tyler and Casey jumped out of the car, and I saw how much they had changed in a week. Tyler had become serious and quiet, and Casey looked sad and confused. Grandpa, the girl cried and threw herself into my arms. I missed you so much. I missed you too, sweetheart, I replied, hugging my granddaughter. Tyler approached more slowly and hugged me around the waist. Grandpa, he asked quietly, are you mad at us? No, son, I replied. I'm never mad at you. Then why did you take so long to come? I looked at Charlene, who was standing next to the car listening to our conversation. I had things to do, I said evasively. But now we're together again. I took the children into the house and started making dinner. In the refrigerator, there were cutlets I had prepared the day before, potatoes and fresh vegetables. The children ate so eagerly that it became clear that they had not been fed well at home. Grandpa, Casey said, eating her second cutlet, can I stay with you? I like your food. Of course you can, I replied. Come whenever you want. After lunch, the children played in the yard while Charlene and I sat in the kitchen and continued our conversation. Dad, my daughter said, I've applied for unemployment benefits. But they won't pay out for another month, and it's only $200 a week. That's better than nothing, I said. Charlene paused, looking out the window at the children playing. I realize I was wrong, she said finally. I got too carried away with spending and stopped thinking about the future. You realize that now that the money is gone, I said. Yes, I do, my daughter agreed, and I'm ready to make amends. I'll find a job and live within my means. Then go and look for one, I said. Go to the shops, cafes, and offices today. Ask everywhere. Sooner or later, someone will agree to hire you. What if they don't? Then you're not looking hard enough, I replied harshly. Our city always needs salespeople, waitresses, cleaners. But I told you I can't work as a cleaner. You can, I objected. You just don't want to. And now you have no choice. Charlene sat silently, and I could see she was trying to find another way out. But there wasn't one. It was either work or poverty. Okay, she said finally. I'll go look for a job tomorrow. Any job, not tomorrow, today, I corrected her. Right now. But it's already evening. Cafes and restaurants are open in the evening. Go there and ask. My daughter realized that I wasn't going to back down. She said goodbye to the children and left to look for a job. My grandchildren stayed with me for the night. In the evening, while we were watching cartoons, Tyler asked, Grandpa, Mom says we don't have any money. Is that true? Yes, I replied honestly. Mom doesn't have a job right now, so we don't have much money. Why isn't she working? She's looking for a suitable job, I said. She'll find one soon. Are we going to starve? Casey asked fearfully. No, I assured the children. If there's nothing to eat at home, come to my place. I'll always feed you. The next morning, Charlene came to pick up the children for school. She looked even worse than yesterday. It was obvious she hadn't slept well. "How's the job search going?" I asked. "I went to 4 places," my daughter replied. "Everywhere they say they'll think about it and call me back." "Then keep looking." "Dad," Charlene said pleadingly, "give me enough money to pay the rent. I promise I'll find a job and pay you back." I looked at my daughter for a long time. Standing before me was a tired, frightened woman who had finally understood what real problems were. But she couldn't give up. "No," I replied. "Figure it out yourself. Sell your car, your things, borrow from your friends. But you have to work yourself." Charlene began to cry quietly, hopelessly. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked through her tears. "What all normal people do," I replied. "Work to feed your children." My daughter wiped her tears and nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll find a job." Any job. She took the children to school, and I stayed home with a heavy heart, but with the firm conviction that I was doing the right thing. Charlene had to learn to live on her own, and the sooner that happened, the better for everyone.